Hello, my name is Mark Billinghurst, and I'm from the University of South Australia. And today I'm going to be talking about empathic computing for experiential telepresence. What I'm really going to be talking about, though, is communication. And as humans, communication is one of the vital parts of our lives. In fact, John Pearce said that communication is not only the essence of being human, but also a vital property of life. Now, in face-to-face communication, there are a wide variety of communication cues used. Audio cues like speech, visual cues like gaze and gesture, and even cues with our environment, like being able to manipulate objects or to draw. But of course, when we move remote from one another, it's really hard to share those same communication cues. And so over the last tens of thousands of years, a wide variety of communication tools have evolved, from cave paintings from 30,000 years ago to radio and television, and to the multi-channel communication we have now with our social media and our mobile phones. Of course, the latest trend is towards the metaverse. And as shown in these pictures from Meta, the idea of the metaverse is you can create an avatar of yourself, and then you can join a multi-sensory communication space and see other people there as well. In fact, there are many companies working on this. So here's some other examples of metaverse situations from Outspace VR or Rec Room. And on the right-hand side, you can see some examples of using augmented reality to bring remote people into your space so you can feel like they're really there. So the overall goal of the metaverse is to feel like you're being there with other people. You're sharing the same space, even though you're thousands of miles apart. However, we can do better than that, and we can go beyond being there. There's this really fantastic research paper that was published almost 30 years ago that talks about how a better way to solve the telecommunication problem is not to focus on the tele part, but to focus on the communication part and develop technologies that's so good that people will use it regardless of where they are. So in my opinion, there are three important trends happening in the communication space right now. The first trend is towards experience capture. This means putting cameras on our heads or laser scanners or 3D sensors so we can capture our surroundings, and we can move from sharing faces like we do with Zoom or video conferencing to being able to share places. A second important trend is towards more natural collaboration. So over the last 50 years, of course, we've got faster and faster networks, and this means we can now send higher and higher bandwidth of data and share, high definition resolution videos of each other, and by doing that, share much more natural communication cues. A third important trend is towards implicit understanding. And what this means is now we're building systems that can recognize our behavior and our emotion. So for example, when you look at your computer, the computer can recognize whether you're feeling happy or sad. Or maybe when you speak to your computer using Siri or other assistants, it can recognize from your tone of voice how you're feeling. So there's a wide variety of sensors now that can understand how we're feeling and what we're about to do before we do it. So these three areas are very important: natural collaboration, experience capture, and implicit understanding. And they can all combine together in an area that we call empathic computing. So most of you, of course, know what empathy is. Alfred Adler famously said that empathy is being able to see with the eyes of another, listening with the ears of another, and feeling with the heart of another. So the goal of empathic computing is really to explore, if we can develop systems that allow us to share what we're seeing, hearing, and feeling with others. And so it goes beyond just seeing each other in the metaverse, because with empathic computing, the idea is really to be able to understand what somebody else is feeling and develop deep empathy for them. So there are several elements of empathic systems. First of all, you have an understanding element. So you have to have systems that are able to recognize emotion and oftentimes use physiological sensors to understand how you're feeling. Secondly, a second element is being able to experience and to share the experience of others. And so this relies on content or environment capture technology, and maybe using virtual reality to immerse yourself into somebody else's environment. And the third key element is being able to share communication cues and enhance somebody's communication in the real world. And augmented reality is a very good tool for using this. So I want to give you a couple of examples of empathic computing systems that we've built in our lab, and then talk about what's next with these systems and where we might go beyond this. So one of the early examples we developed was a system called the empathy glasses. And the idea of the empathy glasses was to enable us to share the same implicit cues we have in face-to-face communication remotely. So to share our eye gaze and our face expression and other cues. So we combine together three technologies. We combine together an eye tracking system, a pair of augmented reality glasses, and also a special pair of glass frames called Effective Wear that could measure your face expression. So this is what the system looked like. The person wore this on his head. In addition to that, we had a heart rate sensor so we could measure their emotions, and we could also measure their face expression. So by combining this technology on their head, we were able to now share a view of their workspace with a remote person. But on top of that view, we could also share their gaze as well. So the remote person knew exactly where the person doing the task was looking. So you can see on the right-hand side there, a picture of what the person is seeing. When they wear this augmented reality system, they can, of course, see their real workspace. But now, because they're sharing their gaze with the remote person, they know where they're looking. And the remote person can also remotely point and share the pointer back in their place. So in this case, we have these really important communication cues, implicit communication cues that we're sharing. So this video shows the system working. What you'll see in this video is a person putting together some wooden blocks under the guidance of a remote person on his computer. And you can see now inside their view, the person is able to move this green pointer, and then the local person's gaze is indicated by the red pointer. So the remote person now can tell whether the local person is paying attention or not, because the red pointer will follow the green pointer. And people always look before they act at an object. So this is a really great way to be able to enable people to feel like they're looking at the same workplace and sharing this important communication cue. We also had this technology to be able to measure your face expression using photo sensors. And so when the person completed the task, you know, he's smiling and happy, and you'll see this little smile appear on the video. So the overall effect of this was that people felt more connected when they were doing this task. I could feel like I was seeing what the other person was doing, and I was looking through their eyes, and I could point and help them achieve this task. And at the same time, I knew exactly where they're looking. But one of the problems of the system is that, of course, we're only seeing a small portion of their real workspace. So in a follow-up project, we looked at how we could use multiple depth sensing cameras to capture a person's surroundings and create a 3D model of the surroundings. And then, of course, because we had that 3D model, that means somebody could now walk through that and experience the person's surroundings inside virtual reality. So we combined together several depth sensors, and each of these depth sensors was able to capture a point cloud of part of the real world. And then we fused that point cloud together to make a 3D model. So you can see in this video, on the left-hand side is a God's eye perspective, and then the right-hand side is a first-person perspective. And now I can jump into the live stream coming from that real space, and you can see now one of my students is walking into that space, and we're capturing them as a real 3D point cloud moving through the space. So as a remote expert or remote user, I can really feel like I'm in that person's space, and I can walk through it and experience it as virtual reality. But we want to go beyond that, and we want to be able to let one person know how somebody else is feeling inside that virtual reality experience. So we developed these shared VR experiences. So here you can have somebody who's playing a game, and while they're playing the game, we're using physiological sensors to measure their heart rate and measure their emotions. And then we have a second person in VR, and the person in VR is an observer, and we put them inside the body, the virtual body of the first person. So now the observer is watching the game from exactly the same position. And we also share with them the heart rate information of the player. So now they can hear the heart beating and see an icon on the screen beating as well. And so our theory was that by doing this, when the player got excited, the person who was inside the virtual player's body should also get more excited and to some extent feel the same emotions. And so we tested this in a couple of different environments. One was this butterfly world where you had a very peaceful scene and these butterflies moving around, and you had to capture them with your butterfly net. The second was this zombie attack scene. And the zombie attack scene, you're in a very dark and scary warehouse, and these zombies would attack you and try and scare you, and so you're being very scared. So here's a video showing the system working.
In this research, we explore the effects of sharing physiological states of players in collaborative virtual reality gameplay. Our goal is to improve and enhance users' empathy among collaborators, especially in a remote setting using advanced computer interfaces. To support this study, we developed a collaborative VR framework which shares the player's position and heart rate to the observer in a virtual environment. The observers view the game from the player's position, but can rotate their head freely to look around. The player's heart rate is measured by a biometric glove. The measured heart rate is shared with the observer using both visual and audio cues. We developed 2 games based on this framework. The first game provides a calm and pleasing experience where the player catches butterflies while surrounded by nature. The second game presents a scary and stressful situation where the player tries to survive zombie attacks. We conducted a study to learn the effects of displaying the player's heart rate to the observer. From the insights gathered in this study, we present a set of guidelines for designing collaborative VR experiences.
So in this study, we looked at how sharing the heart rate from one player would affect the other player's heart rate. And we did find that the viewer felt emotionally connected to the player. And indeed, when the player got more excited, they got more excited as well. But in a follow-up study, we noticed something really interesting. And what we noticed was that we could actually change the heart rate. So you could take the heart rate of the person in VR, and then you could speed it up or you could slow it down. And we could see if that had an impact on the viewer's heart rate. And again, we found that what this did is it affected the perceived valence and arousal levels of the other person. So it affected the perceived emotional state. So we could artificially induce a perception of different emotions inside somebody. So you might ask, well, why are we doing this? Well, one reason is because it would be fantastic in the future if we could be able to capture people's real activity and share it with a remote person. So for example, you could imagine a mountain biker biking down the mountain in the Olympics, and we could have some system that they wear to capture their surroundings and at the same time measure their heart rate and convey that to a remote person. So the remote person who's sitting on their couch at home could get the feeling like they were riding the mountain bike down this mountain track and get the excitement of the biker. Now, of course, it's very difficult to do that technically, but using virtual reality, we can prototype that idea and get the feeling of what it's like to share emotional state inside VR. But we can go beyond just sharing heart rate. And about 10 years ago, psychologists noticed this really interesting effect that happened when people did collaborative tasks. So when you had people doing a shared task, wearing EEG equipment to measure their brain activity, sometimes the brains would become synchronized and the electrical signals would become in phase. And at that point, people would report feeling really connected to the other person or maybe in a state of flow. So you can see an example here. You've got 2 people sitting across from each other and one person is pointing with their hand at the other person. And then the goal is for the person who's pointing to start moving their hand around, and the second person is supposed to follow their hand. So it's a very simple task in the real world, and you can measure both people's brain activity. So here is their brain activity when they start moving. You can see a lot of black dots on the image, and this represents where the EEG electrodes are. Now, at this point, there's no brain synchronization happening, and then you get people to track their fingers for a minute or so, and then to stop moving, and then measure their brain activity again. And we see something very strange happening. So you can see here, now we have these arcs going between each of the heads, and these show electrodes that are now in phase with each other. So now just performing that simple synchronization activity has caused people's brains to become in sync with others. And psychologists have studied this in a range of different ways, and they've seen this happen in a number of different tasks, physical movement tasks like this one, or conversation tasks, or game playing tasks. So what we thought we'd do is see if we could reproduce this inside virtual reality. And so here's a pair of people doing the same task inside VR. Now, of course, because they're in VR, they don't need to look at each other anymore. So they've both got their VR headsets on. And then inside the VR, you can see here, you see a virtual avatar. And again, the goal is to track your finger with the avatar's hand and do that same task. But the really exciting thing with virtual reality is you can put yourself inside somebody else's body. And so we did this. And you can see now the person inside each other's body. So when the person looks down, they see two pairs of hands coming out. And again, the goal is to track the hand motion. And our hypothesis was that because now people are seeing the same perceptual cues, the brain synchronization will be enhanced and they'll feel even more connected to each other. And in fact, that's what we found. So this is a map of the brains, and you can see these dark red lines, and these show the areas of the brains that are connected and are synchronized together electrically. So you might ask, well, why is this important? Well, it turns out that there's a new generation of VR headsets being developed that includes sensors like this into the headset already. You can see here on the left the HP Omnicept display, which includes an eye tracker and heart rate sensor and a face camera, so it can measure your face expressions. And then on the right is the Project Galea from Valve and OpenBCI. And this includes a wide range of sensors such as EEG, EMG, EDA, PPG, EOG, and eye gaze, and so forth. So with these types of VR headsets, we can capture a wide range of physiological cues. And this enables us to understand a lot more about the user. So for example, with the Galea, you can do things like measure attention or measure your arousal level, your face expression, your stress level, your cognitive load. So now we can understand a lot more deeply about how the person is feeling, what their emotional state is, and we can represent that to somebody else. So you can see there's another technology trends happening in this space. First of all, in terms of VR displays, we're getting much better displays with wider field of view and high resolution. We've also got the ability now to capture our real space around us and to stitch it together and share that with somebody else. We can capture the gestures and eye gaze. And then most importantly, like I just showed you, we've got the ability now to capture physiological sensing data and map that to emotions. So all these things trend together to an area that you might call empathic teleexistence. And empathic teleexistence is very different from the metaverse, because with empathic teleexistence, the goal is to move from being an observer to being a participant, to put yourself inside somebody else's body, to feel what they're feeling, to see what they're seeing, and to hear what they're hearing. And this means that you can move from having explicit communication, where you've got to talk to somebody and tell them what you're doing, to implicit communication, where you know what they're going to do before they do it. And this results in experiential collaboration, where you feel like you're doing tasks together. So we believe that this will enable us to go beyond being there and to develop new types of shared experiences that are much richer than what you get in today's metaverse. And in a wide range of applications, you can imagine this being used for healthcare, for neurological rehabilitation, for training, for new types of gaming, for performances, and so forth. So just to conclude, what I've talked about today is about this trend towards communication cues around natural collaboration, experience capture, and implicit understanding. And this all combines together in a new research area that we call empathic computing, which is really about building systems that enhance understanding. And with empathic computing, there's a lot of very exciting research areas that can be explored further, such as, how do you capture and share communication cues? How does this brain synchronization work? Can you enhance it? And most importantly, how can we build this empathic teleexistence where we really feel like we're inside somebody else's body and sharing their experience of the real world with them? So if this is interesting to any of you, I would love to talk more about it. Here's my contact details, our lab website, my email address, and my Twitter feed. And thank you very much for your time. And I look forward to connecting with all of you later.